Hi, I'm Nate from Lovers Adelaide. Now in today's video, I'm going to show you what's involved and how to change out the struts in this front 200 series. So I've already taken the wheel off, just so we can see inside. So here's the new one going in, and obviously there's the old factory one. So I'm going to put this down until we get this old one out. So with these 200 series, the way the suspension is set up, there's on the bottom of the ball joint, there's 2 bolts. So you can take those 2 bolts out, and that will then free up the hub, and then you can move that out of the way as you need. So I'm just going to loosen off the lower control arm, and then that way we can actually swing it out of the way to get this shock out. There's that one, just loosen that one off. And now I'll come to the back one and do the same with the back one. So you don't need to take the whole thing out, you just need to loosen it off. That way it'll allow it to pivot on the joint, on that joint. So if I loosen that top one and this bottom one will come the whole way out. I've already undone the nut on the back of this shock bolt here. Let's just take the pressure off, pull that out. So there's the shock bolt out. So from there, you can just leave it down. That will swing out of the way. So all that's left on the top of it, on the strut top, is 4 bolts. So up the top. With the front struts we're putting in, we can have that. He can have the GVM from anywhere from 3800 up to 4.2. It depends on what shock. So the particular shock going in this one, it's our 4.2 ton remote reservoir shock. So this customer's actually getting the 4.2 ton GVM. But even just a suspension lift, if you're not after the GVM, just a suspension lift, you can still use the remote reservoir shocks. You just don't get the government paperwork to say that it's had the GVM increase. So if you're just after it just for the lift and for off-road capabilities, it's still a fantastic way to go. And obviously just the suspension kit itself is cheaper rather than paying for the engineering and the government paperwork. So those 4 nuts are off, and then from there, that'll just slide out. So that's the old one. That's out of the vehicle now, so we'll go ahead and replace the new one. You can see I've just levered the sway bar down and installed this spanner here. This is actually just holding with the KDSS. The sway bar is trying to pull up, so the hydraulics is pulling it up. It's then hitting on the tie rod and the steering arm and lifting the whole hub up. And it's a nuisance. We've found if you put a spanner in there, just hold the arm down, it frees up that arm, and then you can actually move the hub a lot easier. Okay, so with these here, normally we reuse this strut top itself, so we'll undo it all and reuse that strut top. We do have changeover ones here, so we can make it quicker. We can build them first, pull them out, put them straight in, and then when we get free time, disassemble this one, and then we'll keep the strut top and reuse them. So if you're doing this yourself at home, you do have the option of buying a second set of strut tops. So it's easy to do at home, but unless you've got the correct tools and equipment to actually compress the springs, so you actually assemble them, it can be quite dangerous, and it's very easy for us to do it ourselves. But in saying that, there is numerous spring options that you can get depending on your vehicle with what weight and accessories are on it. So we obviously like to set up every customer's vehicle depending on what accessories are on it, match it with the perfect spring to suit their application. So I've already assembled this one. I've put our changeover strut top on it, and then from there we can throw it in. Once it's in there, if you just do up these front 2, just finger tight, it's going to allow this shock to flex and move. That way you can actually push it together, align it up, and put that shock bolt in. So once that shock bolt's in, go ahead, do all 4 of them up, put the other 2 on, and do all 4 of them up, and that's going to lift that lower controller up. You can see the gap between the lower ball joint and the hub. So you just need to just leave it down slightly, and then if you put a socket on the bolt, it gives you a bit more leverage just to be able to manipulate it. And that way you can do it up. So once it's started, that's fine. I can let go. It's going to hold itself there. And then with the back one, it's even easier. You can just push it through and then just pull the hub out, and you can see it. If I go again, you'll see it actually click in and then just start it. So once they're started by hand, that's fine. I can then grab the rattle gun and just rattle them tight. So that's those two. So they're both tight, and that's all good. Last thing is to do is the sway bar. And one thing we've said before, that lower shock bolt, that will not get done up now. Once the vehicle is complete on the ground, sitting on its own weight, we'll then do it up. So if you do them up now, it's not in its resting position, and then as soon as you put it on the ground, it's going to rip that bush when it tries to turn. So always do that lower shock bolt up on the ground in its resting position. That's the way you're not going to rip that bush, and you're going to get the longest life out of it possible. All right, so you can see here with the 4.2, the remote reservoir shock, I've obviously left with this hose and the reservoir. So with these on the this particular model, we're going to run up behind the upper control arm. So I do have to move some of these lines, feed that around, and I'm going to put that in here. We've got some special brackets to mount in behind there. Just to remove that spanner, we'll take that out of the way, just to help locate it. Once that's sitting in there, once it goes onto the ground, it's all going to line up, and you'll see that click in, and then you can just start it by hand and then just gun it up tight. But that's that one. Once that's tight, you can then do this top one here up as well. So that's something that's going to have to get done on the ground again. You can do it now in the air, but it's a lot more difficult, and you run the risk of stripping it and cross-threading it. So I prefer to do it on the ground. It eliminates that possibility and that risk, and it's a lot easier, I find. This side here, I've got it up to the same stage. I've put the shock in, got it all bolted up, done the bolts up on the top. So I'm going to set this up here, hit time lapse, and I will show you. Follow along. We'll set the time lapse of how we run the remote reservoirs. They're a bit different to the Dominus's and the King suspension. Those ones mount. Some of them mount in the same spot, but obviously our hose comes off the bottom, not off the top of these. So jump along, see how we do it.